A look at the massive security setup in Sochi, Russia, as thousands prepare to travel to the Olympics. And now a new State Department warning has American athletes taking extraordinary precautions. ABC's Kirat Radia is in Moscow with the breaking details. Kirat.
Good morning, Martha. The new warning from the State Department urges Americans at the Olympics to be on the lookout for a terror attack. The travel warning says that there's no specific threat to Americans, but it warns to be particularly vigilant on public transportation. All of this comes after a recent string of deadly terror attacks have rocked this region, and after Russia's most wanted terrorist urged his followers to target the games. President Putin has deployed tens of thousands of troops and a massive surveillance program, all of which means these Olympics will take place on lockdown. The FBI is sending agents to Sochi in case they can be of help, but the U.S. ski team is not taking any chances. They've hired a private security firm to evacuate them in case of an emergency. The State Department is also warning Americans about Russia's anti-gay law, saying that anyone thought to be promoting homosexuality, including fans at the Olympics, could face jail time. Martha?
Thanks, Kirat. It's a story we'll be tracking, but we are back now with the roundtable. I want to continue on with Robert Gates's book, and I want to turn to the war in Afghanistan. He talked a lot about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. One of the things he said about the mission points right to President Obama. He said, "As I sat there, I thought the president doesn't trust his commander, can't stand Karzai, doesn't believe in his own strategy, and doesn't consider the war to be his. For him, it's all about getting out." He also said that he thought the president supported the troops, but not the mission. One of the things Secretary Gates did here is not only talk about a sitting president, but a sitting commander-in-chief. You are still in the military as a reservist, did 2 tours in Iraq. Does this undermine President Obama as commander-in-chief?
It may chip away at that a little bit, but I might have to take a different view than the panel. I mean, I think it's important for some of this to come out. I mean, the reality is nobody's been critical of this administration's foreign policy, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. By and large, we haven't heard a lot of it. For Gates to come out and say, look, here behind the scene, this is the truth. The president and Hillary Clinton opposed the surge for political reasons. By the way, using politics on foreign policy is absolutely terrible, and a leader should never do that. And in terms of Afghanistan, when was the last time you've heard, and I'm a believer in the war in Afghanistan that we can and should win, when was the last time you've heard the President of the United States tell the American people why we're there and what our interest is? He hasn't talked about it. He's avoided it. And in fact, in the bilateral security agreement, we're hearing that they're floating a number of 9,000 or 10,000 American troops when General Allen and generals on the ground recommended at least 15,000 to accomplish the mission. This is important today because America is paying for this, and it's our men and women over there.
Matthew, could it have waited a few years?
The book?
A book?
Yeah, this...
After the president is out of office. And I just want to go back to that point, too, because as you all know, have been around a lot of our service members. They love Bob Gates. They love Bob Gates. So do they hear Bob Gates saying, the president didn't really care that much about this mission, he wasn't invested in that, and say, Obama's not a great guy?
Well, I mean, go back to whether a book should come out. It's free press right, freedom to do that and all that. All I'm saying is from a standpoint of governing and all that, books that come out that are tell-all books. This wasn't a book that basically, I don't think, added a lot of value that sort of said, wow, we didn't know that. I mean, everybody basically knew the president was against the war, wanted to be out of it, and he asked serious questions of the generals and the commanders, which had not happened a lot in the previous
have been talking about that, right,
administration.
Right.
But I want to say one thing. One thing that about the book, and it was his criticism was of President Obama, was that he supported the troops more than the mission. There's a quote in the book that says this, Martha. This is from Bob Gates. Even thinking about the troops, I would lose my composure with increasing frequency. I realized I was beginning to regard protecting them, the troops, avoiding their sacrifice as my highest priority, and I knew that this loss of objectivity meant it was time to leave. That, to me, is disturbing. You basically have a Secretary of Defense who basically says you should support the mission more than the troops, and when you start supporting the troops, I have to leave.
As a military guy, I have to take a quick issue with that, in that, as a commander, If I worry only about the safety of the people that work for me, I'll never accomplish a mission. The reality is you have to take that into account. But your highest calling is to achieve the mission that your commander-in-chief in your country calls on you.
Well,
David, Plouffe, get in there on that. Yeah, get in there on that.
Well, first of all, in terms of the excerpt you mentioned, I mean, President Obama campaigned in 2008 on ending the Iraq War, but adding troops to Afghanistan. So he believed in what he did here. The notion that he didn't have trust in his commander, in David Petraeus, he named him CIA director. So I take huge issue with this.
But he talks about him not having trust in a lot of the military and thinking he was.
He has deep. I was with him in the White House. He has deep trust. But a president's job is to ask tough questions, and a president's job is to make decisions based on the overall interest of the country. So not everybody in the military agreed with his decision to end Iraq War and pull all the troops out. Not everybody in the military agreed with the timeline in Afghanistan.
Right.
But these are tough decisions presidents have to make, and they're consistent with what he committed to the American people.
But, you know, Secretary Gates was involved in a lot of confidential meetings in the Situation Room and other places. So President Obama's crime, I guess, according to you, Congressman, and thank you for your service, of course, was that he questioned the generals. Thank God somebody questioned the general, questioned our strategy. We've been there for a long time. And the country had become weary of the war, weary of our mission, not understanding why we were there. They didn't see the Afghanistan take responsibility, step up. Mr. Karzai, is he with us, not with us? The president had every right to question what was the strategy at the time. It wasn't about the troops, it was about the mission going forward. And that's what the president was elected to do.
And he had other military advisors.
Sure. Look, he's got every right to question. He should. And if Bob Gates' book said that the president never questioned his military generals, I'd be just as critical of the president on that. He absolutely should. The problem is, though, when they say he's engaging American troops in a mission he doesn't believe in, or he engaged in a strategy that he didn't believe would be successful. Look, as I said, I'm for winning the war in Afghanistan, but if I actually thought the president thought we never could, I'd be critical of the fact that he sent 20,000 troops to do what he never thought we could accomplish. We see what's happening in Iraq today. I call this a 2011.
I think first off, as you know, I had a son who served in Iraq, and as a parent, I think I want the leaders to basically first priority is when they send our men and women over there, their first priority is keeping them healthy and their well-being. But there's a bigger, broader thing here. We've had two major wars in the last 50 years, two major wars, the Vietnam War and the Iraq War, where basically $2 to $3 trillion has been spent with no gain. No gain, thousands and thousands and thousands of loss of our men and women, and I think that we swung way too much over to the idea that we can fight these wars with limited thing and get major accomplishment, and more to, do we really want to do this?
Matthew, I want to turn on this and get to domestic politics in just a moment, but I cannot pass up what you believe should happen in Iraq now. We have Al-Qaeda flying flags in Fallujah. I was in Fallujah the day before U.S. troops pulled out. That was a flashpoint. We lost almost 100 Marines there fighting. You think we should employ airstrikes?
Yeah. Look, this is Al-Qaeda. This isn't an internal Sunni Shia thing going on. I've always said, and the president has said, anywhere where Al-Qaeda exists, they shouldn't feel safe. If they exist in Fallujah, they should not feel safe.
To what end?
To what end is helping the Iraqi government to push Al-Qaeda out of Fallujah.
So we should side with Maliki, who has been siding with Iran
against
and now
Al-Qaeda, absolutely,
Russia.
Absolutely.
And you think that'll solve the problem?
I don't know if it'll solve the problem, but it'll help push Al-Qaeda out of Fallujah. I think the problem exists because there's no policy from this administration in Syria, and this has expanded this everywhere. Yeah. But when you have Al-Qaeda in Fallujah, my goodness, I hope we're going to take it.
I don't think he's going to
resources.
I don't think he's going to get any resources to do that.
But no troops on the ground.
Yeah, I agree. No troops on the ground.
And Maliki cannot.
And I don't think you're going to see airstrikes.
No.
With this president.
The problem is when democracy is imposed from the outside and the top down, it never works. And Iraq is a perfect explanation of why, when we do this, it never works.
I just
we got to move to domestic policy here, or we're not going to have any time for domestic policy. We're going to do it very quickly. This week, of course, you had the unemployment report, which was not very good. The jobs report gaining 74,000 jobs, and the war on poverty. Donna.
Well, first of all, the war on poverty. I mean, Lyndon Johnson said we're going to wage an unconditional war on poverty. It was more than just domestic programs. It was basically sending a message to the country, the richest country on the planet, that we can do better. We can lift people out of poverty. It was an education program. I'm glad we're celebrating that milestone. unemployment insurance, it's really up to Senator Reid being able to get those 6 or 7 Republicans back on the same page, figuring out a way to help 1.3 million Americans, because if we don't help them, this is going to hurt the economy. It's going to create more unemployment. These employment insurance is something that we should guarantee the people who are still out there looking for work.
Do you support this?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if we can pay for it and Harry Reid can provide something, I'll take a look at what it is. The reality, though, is this is kind of the straw man of the fact that we still live in a very terrible economy. The best unemployment insurance we can give people is a job, get them an opportunity to come back. And so, look, I think a little self-medicine for our party. We have to do a much better job of showing our compassion for the poor. We have compassion, we just don't articulate it. My father, for instance, ran a homeless shelter for 25 years. I was raised in this environment. And so we need to talk as Republicans about how conservative policies aren't based on simply balancing a checkbook. It's the fact that we want a kid born in inner city Chicago to have the same opportunity as a kid born in Massachusetts or Denver.
Okay, thanks to you all.